Gonna start out just gonna get my nightcap on, guys. Get the interview show started with the nightcap, and then we will move on quickly, guys. Second show of the day, but technically it's Sunday here, so we're gonna do the interview. I have a few things saved up. I have a few things to go over. Might as well get it going. I did a daytime stream, which is unusual for me, so I gotta come back and do the normal late night. Try to get my regulars their live stream if a handful of people join. I am a little later than usual for a Saturday, but let's see if we get a few joiners. I got a long clip I want to react to. I got a some Blue Dream Shatter on top of Mateo Blue Indica Smoke Flower. So we're gonna toast one up and get going right into and move on. Oliver Stone, Abby Martin had a conversation. Call it an interview, call it a conversation, call it a directed interview, but this is a good conversation to have, right? Um, and I might, they have a topic that YouTube likes to demonetize, censor, and whatnot. So we might have to go only on Twitch for a little while. We'll see. We'll see how it goes. But let's toast one up. Let's grab your drinks. Let's get this
Is one of
started.
the most acclaimed filmmakers of our generation. Oliver Stone is one of the most acclaimed filmmakers of our generation. In 1991, Stone released the cinematic feature JFK, which dismantled the government's official story of the Kennedy assassination. The enormous public reception led to a major piece of legislation, the JFK Records Act of 1993. Through the release of these files, researchers have been able to piece together more of the story, which only raises more questions. This is the subject of Oliver Stone and James DiEugenio's new documentary film called JFK Revisited.
I don't consider myself that documentary filmmaker that, let's say, Emile D'Antonio used to be back in the old days,
Yeah, everything seems to maybe play now. Seem to have stuck for a little bit. Um, you seem to have gotten stuck. Let's see how it catches up. All right, let's try it again. I'm gonna play it at 1 1/4 speed so it doesn't throttle us.
serious documentarian. No, I stumbled onto these things. I had to grow because my father was conservative and I grew up that way. So it took me time to figure out my path in this world. Obviously, the Vietnam War had a lot to do with it, but, learning things as I went. So I was hardly where I am now, where I was when I started. So it's been growth in all these things, I have to say. It's really important to understand that. I didn't really start doing documentaries until 2001 when I did the Castro documentary. Before 2000, no, I was doing features. And I still love features, but not always. And also, they're more complicated and more expensive to make. Documentaries allow you to speak more directly to the issue. So, that said, the JFK case came up in 1988, 89, when I was making Born on the 4th of July, and I met a very interesting woman called Elaine Ray, who ran Sheridan Square Press. She had known Jim Garrison very well and had been at the trial. She'd been a big supporter of the trial back in New Orleans in '69. And gave me this book that Jim had written called On the Trail of the Assassins. And it was about his journey into this case. In New Orleans, he was the district attorney of New Orleans Parish. I wasn't really knowledgeable about the case until I read the book and then started to do some research. I met with Jim, which was quite interesting. He opened up a whole world to me. And then I met with Fletcher Prouty, who had been a Air Force officer, had been working with the CIA for many years, since World War II. So then from there, it was down the rabbit hole. Read the book, optioned it, made my Born on the 4th of July, very interested in it, went back to New Orleans, started doing more and more reading and read a lot. And I said, this is a great idea. This is a movie. This is like a chance to do, one of my favorites was Z by Costa Gavras in France. And he was a Greek filmmaker, but it's about the Greek coup d'etat of the 60s. And I said, we can do it somewhat like that. It would be a revelation. You would start with Dealey Plaza you see the surface of events like it was reported, the conventional approach, and then as you dug deeper, it becomes deconstructed. And that was a perfect movie for me. It was like I'm peeling an onion. But this is a much larger story. And I was saying I started on a smaller level. This was about a New Orleans story, a prosecutor going after the only prosecutor in the United States who brought charges in the Kennedy case. It's very important because it established at least a beginning of something.
On March 1st, 1967, the first arrest has been made in the investigation of the New Orleans District Attorney's Office into the assassination of President John F. Kennedy. Arrested this evening in the District Attorney's Office was Clay Shaw. Mr. Shaw will be charged with participation in a conspiracy to murder John F. Kennedy.
You know, I mean, assassination sometimes is limited in its political scope. But there was a much bigger story here, and Garrison knew it, found out about it. And that's where we wrote the scene where he meets Donald Sutherland in Washington, D.C. Sutherland is basically on Prouty, who tells him the story of his experience and what he thinks happened that day. And it was definitely, the president is removed for political reasons, very important political reasons, because he's changing things, which is not really evident to the American public at that time, nor is it evident to Jim Garrison. This takes time. You have to study the history. You have to study what he was doing. You have to study the foreign policy. And that makes it a much bigger story and a much more interesting story. In the movie, Kevin Costner, who plays Jim Garrison, turns to the Donald Sutherland and says, "This is much bigger than I thought. I can't handle this." And it's true. He wasn't prepared to handle this. 5 different departments of the CIA were on Garrison. It's quite a story. They put informers into his office. They wiretapped him. All his subpoenas out of state were killed. I mean, there was quite it's conspiracy against Garrison. They went after him, and they completely ridiculed him. But he went ahead with the case. Grand jury believed him. Grand jury serious. And the case, the trial fell apart in the sense that he didn't have enough evidence. But he proved certain things in the case, and that was very important, actually.
I know that you followed the conventional wisdom about the JFK assassination until around '88. But as a young man, how did that impact you? I mean, politically, seeing the president of the United States assassinated, seeing RFK assassinated, and then this slew of political assassinations. That must have impacted you.
In the 60s, we were all shocked. It was just shocking, that's all. We didn't make sense of it. Our leaders were cut down, but we didn't really put it all together. Nobody ran the dots between the lines between John Kennedy and Martin Luther King or Robert Kennedy. We didn't make the connections. Now, I think we can make those connections because they're important to make. But then, no. I was just reacting like everyone else. And then, of course, I went to Vietnam as a soldier, came back. I didn't even connect the Vietnam War to the death of Kennedy. That's very important. The narrative at the time was that Lyndon Johnson took power and continued the policies of Kennedy. That is nonsense, rubbish. That is absolutely not true. Except for civil rights, Johnson completely changed every foreign policy in every country that Kennedy was working with. Kennedy was trying to change things, but we didn't know what Kennedy was up to because he was a charismatic president, spoke very well, but we really didn't know what was going on behind the scenes, And I brought many of these issues up in the film. I brought up the Vietnam issue, I brought up Cuba issue, I brought up the Russia issue, but I didn't deal with Africa, I didn't deal with Indonesia, I didn't deal with Latin America. There was a lot of other things that Kennedy was doing, which we found out in the course of making this JFK Revisited through the looking glass.
Well, it's been 30 years since you released JFK. It was a huge commercial and critical success. People were hungry for the truth, clearly. They wanted something like this. They wanted an entry point to know that this was the alternative narrative that made sense, right? There was a deep distrust of the mainstream narrative. But despite this amazing reception, there were papers like the Washington Post, the Chicago Tribune, months prior to the film's release. They were already excoriating it in the press. Yeah. How did your position change in the legacy media after JFK?
Big question. I had no idea what I was getting into. I thought the case was over. At the beginning, I thought it was over and it was done with, and that I was going into ancient history here, and I was bringing up that it didn't make any sense. The Warren Commission was a fraud. It had a set scenario, that 3 bullets, 1 gunman, and it had to stick to that story. It didn't make sense. It was completely illogical. And to this day, I'm shocked that the elite American went with that story. Everybody was uneasy with that story, and that's the truth. People don't know that. Lyndon Johnson himself said, "Yeah, I don't believe the magic bullet theory." He had many doubts, but so did Robert Kennedy, Jackie Kennedy. Jackie Kennedy made a message to Khrushchev about, don't think that this was a Russian agent that shot Kennedy. This was done by a right-wing cabal in the United States. That's what they were saying. And other people, Charles de Gaulle, all these people were experienced in world affairs. They didn't buy that story. Neither did Nasser in Egypt, Sukarno in Indonesia, and Castro in Cuba. Castro had almost been assassinated a dozen times more by the CIA, so he knew what was going on and knew that his plan for possible reconciliation with the United States was dead in the water. Same was true about Nikita Khrushchev, the premier of Russia, cried. He cried when he went to the American embassy to pay his respects because he knew that all the plans that they had for détente were dead in the water. Johnson was a return to the days of Eisenhower and Dulles and Truman. Please remember that Roosevelt was a big believer in détente also with Russia. He recognized Russia in 1933 when he became president. That was the first time American government had recognized a communist country.
Yeah.
And he got along with Stalin. He got along with him. And they had plans. You know, people say that, Stalin was leading them along. No, Stalin genuinely liked Roosevelt because he could deal. They were both canny politicians. And after Roosevelt died so suddenly in 1945, everything changed in American policy against Russia.
Well, they must have been terrified that Kennedy was going to be another Roosevelt,
That's
right?
right. But at that time, you see, now it's shocking. You say, oh, it's impossible. It's impossible to believe there would be a peace between Russia and the United States. This is after 60 years of this ridiculous foreign policy we have, where we threat inflation of Russia, China, Iran. We build up our enemies. Why? Because of, frankly, financial reasons. It's a huge boondoggle to the public, to the Pentagon.
Well, it must have been so frustrating
and the
to
intelligence
see.
agencies.
It must have been so frustrating to see the accolades that JFK received, yet the corporate media
Oh, that's just a disgusting story.
undermining the film's message in such a way.
We found out later, of course, that the CIA had assets in the media, a lot more than we ever knew or at that time. It only came out in the 70s, and it continues to this day. They were planted, and some of these newspapers, you have to think about who owns them and who, some of them they're owned by rich people. Rich media tends to bend towards the government, cooperating with the government. You have to wonder, because of all the things that have happened, and you're aware of it since the 1960s, some of these newspapers' assets in themselves, like the Washington Post. I mean, some of the insane things that they've done and said. The New York Times itself, which used to be a fountain of so-called integrity, you have to have very serious doubts about, because the New York Times has supported every war America's been in, including Vietnam and Korea. Right. And since then, supported it, and then eventually maybe moved away from it after it didn't work out so well. And we don't have a free media. That's what that's what the conclusion is. The only media that seems free right now, to me, that is open to the thought that Kennedy could have been killed by a conspiracy run by the government, are the people working like you, who are working outside mainstream media. It really worries me. And the response to my film, Revisited, total blackout. There's not one mention of it. They can't deal with the facts that we present in this documentary. The Warren Commission was not run by, but the major, most influential member was Allen Dulles, who was the head of the CIA, had been fired by Kennedy, and he was appointed by Johnson to the commission. And he supervised. He was at every meeting. He supervised it pretty closely, and he made sure that the CIA never revealed anything of importance to the commission.
It reminds me of Henry Kissinger being appointed to head the 9/11 Commission. I mean,
Well,
it just doesn't make any sense.
This is
It makes
far
no
worse.
sense.
Kissinger never got there. The Dulles brothers always tended to go off on their own and do what they wanted to do. And under Eisenhower, they achieved a power and independence that was unbelievable. Eisenhower did not really supervise the CIA during those 1950s years, that's when they grew powerful with the Iran coup, with the coup in Guatemala, and also the secret attempts to remove Sukarno in Indonesia. But they were everywhere in the world. It's very hard to imagine. Go back, 1945, Roosevelt dies, right? This is a man who's trying to move towards by 1963, when Kennedy's killed, it's only...
The United Nations by... Jeez, it keeps... A handful of years after the United Nations was created, all of a sudden it was massively bigger than the handful of countries it started as.
Like 18 years, 45, 55, 63. 18 years of an interregnum where the national security state takes over. We didn't have that before, all through our history. All of a sudden, it's a new world from 45 to 63. Building up military weapons of war in peacetime, an army, keeping the nuclear mandate tightly under control, trying to deny any other country the right to nuclear so that we'd be the kingpin, which we were. So by 1963, it's only been in business 18 years. It's preparation for war state, national security. Everything is an emergency. This is what really basically happened. America all of a sudden was running the world and deciding who's who and who's boss. We are the bully, and we got bigger and bigger. 63, it was going to be over. He was going to go back to the Roosevelt way of doing business, which was a cooperative peace, as he said in his peace speech in 1963, 3 months before he died.
What kind of a peace do I mean, and what kind of a peace do we seek? Not a Pax Americana, enforced on the world by American weapons of war. Not the peace of the grave or the security of the slave, I am talking about genuine peace, the kind of peace that makes life on earth worth living, the kind that enables men and nations to grow and to hope and build a better life for their children. Not merely peace for Americans, but peace for all men and women. Not merely peace in our time, but peace in all time. I speak of peace, therefore, as the necessary, rational end of rational men. I realize the pursuit of peace is not as dramatic as the pursuit of war, and frequently the words of the pursuers fall on deaf ears, but we have no more urgent task.
He pays homage to the Russians, how many people they lost in World War II, and he says they are like us.
Hits right about today, huh? Man.
They have lost half their country. I mean, that was enormous below World War II. They won World War II, basically. And they broke the German war machine. After that, Kennedy said, you know, we are all mortal. We love our children. We drink the same water. We breathe the same air. We are mortal. He understood that. That was a man of compassion because he'd been in war, like Roosevelt. That's why I find him remarkable, like Roosevelt, in the sense that he understood war and the danger of war, and he was no war lover. He'd been there. He constantly said war is not inevitable. He used to say that. Peace, peace. He was pushing peace. And now he disappears in '63. Johnson takes over. Within a year, we're sending combat troops. He only had advisors there.
Right.
Combat troops to Vietnam. Within 2 years, 500,000 troops are there. Johnson is into a war right away. And it's a miracle we didn't go to war with Cuba because that's what the Pentagon wanted.
Set off just
The
a
reason
chain of
Kennedy was
events.
killed,
Yeah.
basically, I'm just jumping around here, but the reason I believe that he was killed was that he refused to go to war twice in Cuba. That's really the reason. People say that it was Vietnam. No, Vietnam was still out there. The problem was that Kennedy inherited Berlin, the Berlin situation, the wall. He built the wall. He said the wall is better than a war.
At this moment in Guatemala, a Cuban exile army is being created by the CIA. A Cuban exile air force with B.
They had literally fucking footage of it. Oh my god. That's intense. I wish we could have footage of like our guerrilla shit right now. That'd be great. We have so much guerrilla shit going on. I want some footage of it.
They are the instruments with which the CIA plans to overthrow Fidel Castro. In less than 72 hours, Castro has destroyed the brigade. The American planned, trained, and backed invasion of Cuba is now a total failure.
In Cuba, Bay of Pigs, he did not back. Dulles was counting on him sending troops to support the invasion because they had been pinned down on the beach. So he expected, like Eisenhower would do, that Kennedy would come in. Kennedy said no, and he told him in advance he wouldn't do it. It was just a botched invasion. Ridiculous. He said he didn't want any Americans getting into Cuba and then we'd be considered the bad guy again. He was very aware of that. He wanted a new regime. He wanted a clean slate. America is no longer what you think it is. We're not going to go around overthrowing regimes, intervening in countries. That's out. And he stuck to that. And they hated him for it. They started to hate him for it, the Cubans especially.
That's a big deal in the middle of the Cold War to make such statements like that.
But then it gets even bigger deal because in 1962, a year and a half later, we have the Cuban Missile Crisis in October '62. And again, he gets the maximum pressure from his chiefs of staff and from his military leaders and the CIA and from the older people around him. Let's call it the older statesmen like Dean Acheson, who was Secretary of State. Even Eisenhower tells him to go into Cuba now. And I can understand these people are thinking in World War II terms, you know, like this, we cannot allow communists to be off our shores. Kennedy says, throughout this crisis, we are not invading, we are not attacking. We're going to try to solve this thing because otherwise it's going to lead to a major, major Armageddon. It'll be Cuba, and then it'll be Russia, and then it'll be us in Berlin, and then it grew as big as we're going to go into China because the Pentagon had a plan.
Yeah, to nuke China. This was...
All this came to being. This was Eisenhower's plan.
Yeah.
All this came into being in 62 in October.
Yeah.
It was a scary moment.
Averting potential nuclear Armageddon. Staving off the military-industrial complex that was pressuring him to add troops
Totally.
to Cuba, the Bay of Pigs. I mean, that is a really important force that you are resisting.
People don't
right?
understand that still. They don't understand how close it came. I think that was his death warrant when he refused attacking Cuba in '62. He wouldn't do it.
Right.
And they knew he wouldn't do it because he really stuck to his guts on that. That took tremendous amount of courage on his part because he was alone there with his brother, Robert,
Right.
and he didn't have much support. And his brother and him solved the case. They with Khrushchev directly. Those two were both were responsible for saving basically the world from going to war. Both were removed within a year. Kennedy says, if I won't go into Cuba, which is 90 miles away, why would I go into Vietnam, which is 6,000 miles away? And he stuck to that logic basically throughout. And we, in our documentary, have gone back and the Assassination Records Review Board has done more work, declassification of files, including a very important meeting in April of 63 when McNamara is in Hawaii. He tells the generals there that we're coming out of Vietnam, basically win or lose. We have to go faster, he says. Now that's a very important point because people dispute that. They say,
Right. Historians have disputed that. After JFK came out, there was a lot of dissent saying
Yes,
that
but
was
that
not
is-
true, but you were vindicated later on with the documents.
You know
I mean,
more
this
and more
was
about it
proven.
because McNamara wrote a book about
Yeah.
it after my film,
Right.
where
And
he said
even-
we were
even-
coming out win or lose. McGeorge Bundy later on wrote another book. He was the national security advisor. He was a hawk, and he said Kennedy was pulling out. But I had a lot of advice from people like Fletcher Prouty, the people who were involved in these decisions, and they were around the case. And I talked to a lot of military people. They know what was going on. You can't hide that. This was a draft. It was written, prepared, everything put out, and then it was redrafted. And then they wouldn't go with that redraft. That was when he was killed, and Johnson put out another draft called 273, National Security Action Memorandum 273, and it changes the rules by which we are allowed to attack North Vietnam with our Air Force, and we did that. We led to the Bay of Pigs. It led to the
Tonkin.
Gulf of
Well, the
Tonkin
Tonkin resolution, the fact that it was written up prior to even the alleged attack, I think really speaks volumes.
We brought so much more evidence to this, but the truth is that it was Cuba that was the reason he was killed. That was set in motion, the plot.
Yeah, that's intense. Whew. All right. So yeah, I don't ever want to play the whole interview from somebody, and I'm getting constant freaking hits on my signal strength, which means rather there's a storm, which it's 70 and gorgeous out down here. So yeah, I can't have them talking about JFK too much, or my stream will get cut. So, let's move on. Another thing I can't talk about too long, or else my weak ass stream will get cut. But speaking of which, share this out, guys. Share it out, like it, hit the notification so you know when I go live. Mostly randomly, late at night. Most nights I go live, coming home from the bar because I am a bartender. We're gonna do a little bit of crypto review, and this seems to get me throttled anytime I talk about crypto. So. Just a short review. Today's episode of Crypto RS was Don't Miss These Altcoins, Crypto and Bitcoin Recovery. And I'm not going to have the whole thing, obviously, but we will review which coins he's talking about today and just talk about his market, listen to his market review.
Happy Saturday morning, afternoon, night, depending on where you are. So let's take a look. Bitcoin is still holding above 39,000. It's kind of gone flat, but you can see that, yeah, it's holding. That's very positive. And it's still slowly going up there. So we are definitely seeing some momentum right now to the upside. And same thing with altcoins. The entire crypto market cap is flying higher, and you can see a lot of greens. Of course, this is because a lot of altcoins were sold off the last few weeks, right? A lot of undervalued projects out there. And I would argue most of them are still undervalued, despite some of these greens, some of the gains that we witnessed the last few days. Still very, very undervalued versus, let's say, 2 weeks ago, 30 days ago, 90 days ago, right? A lot of bargains out there. So I'm going to cover a few of them. 3 projects that I definitely feel like are must-holds, and they have been sold off. So with that said, let me get started with what's going on with Ukraine right now. It does seem like this is day 3, and Kiev, interesting enough,
Can't escape it. Just so you know, all news right now is about it, so we can't escape it. I knew this segment was coming up. It's a small part of it. Market review, Bitcoin in Kiev, and then, yeah. and then we'll review what coins he wants to go over.
I always thought it was called Kiev, and then I've noticed
Kiev.
people in Ukraine call it Kiev, and then I see in the comments people arguing back and forth about the right pronunciation, but I'm just going to go with Kiev. All right, so I'm going to stick with it. But, yeah, Ukraine is, the military is still trying to defend the city. President Zelensky says they still control it. And according to President Zelensky, that they're doing a really good job halting the forces. And Russia did not expect this. Russia expected to have, basically conquered Ukraine within a matter of days. But that's seeming like it's not the case anymore. We're going to day 3, and they're still holding strong. But obviously, Russia still has a massive amount of military that they have not sent in yet. So we'll see if this continues. But right now, Ukrainians are still holding as best as they could. You're starting to see some, casualties, some residential buildings and apartments now getting struck, and it's unfortunate, right? But overall, the numbers, where are the numbers here? Yeah, there's a lot of, gruesome pictures right now. This is why war sucks. It really does. But right now, in total, and then, of course, this number always is very fluid and will fluctuate, but 198 Ukrainians have been killed with over 1,100 wounded. And then on the flip side, an estimated 3,500 Russian soldiers have been killed and 200 taken prisoners. So obviously, Russia's taking most of the blows at this point. Now, in addition to this, Turkey is getting involved. Last week or so, we've been hearing about all these sanctions and everyone, right, that's getting involved. But guess what? Turkey, all of a sudden, decided to close off the Black Sea so that Russian warships that are trying to move in, they were denied and blocked off. So this is actually real action. This is not just a sanction. We know the U.S., right, UK, NATO, everyone joining in on sanctions, but said they will not be sending soldiers and not helping in any way other than sending supplies and weapons and money. But Turkey is actually doing something about it. So
Interesting. I just wanted to hear his take on things. So yeah, let's go over real quick what coins he wants to go over today. Terra, of course, is his big one. He thinks it was a small altcoin. Terra is a big one. And the US Tether, Phantom, Cosmos is another one. And he usually talks about Solano as well. So yeah, it's our quick crypto review of the day. Quick enough that we don't get taken down for it. Long enough that you get an idea. Crypto RS is the guy I go to there for most of the time. I have a lot more people I follow on Twitter, but I try not to go on there a lot, so we will move on. Alright, first interview of the day. And this is going to be Status Quo again. I believe it's Tina from Status Quo, and she is talking with somebody that's on the ground in Ukraine on the front lines.
I am speaking today with a Ukrainian citizen who resides in the city of Mariupol, which is in the southeastern part of Ukraine. This morning when we first spoke, the Russian troops were starting to enter the city. She also mentioned to me that there is landmines, a minefield that exists around the city, so it's impossible for the citizens to leave because they are fear if they try to leave, they might hit one of these planted mines. I believe the mines were put there probably by the Russian separatists because this is where the line of skirmish has been during the last 8 years of the Civil War. I have her sister with me today, who is a U.S. citizen, and will be helping to translate the interview. But I thought it would be very valuable to speak with somebody that's living right there in the middle of the conflict and hear from them directly what it's like to be there and how people feel about the situation. So welcome.
Thank you.
So, what is it like right now, just on the day-to-day of being a Ukrainian citizen? You folks are in a very multi-ethnic part of the country. Originally, the city was Greek, I'm learning. I didn't know that originally. So there's a lot of Greeks there, there's a lot of Russians there, and Ukrainians, of course. So it's very much multi-ethnic, but it's also been sort of ground zero for a conflict in which, you have the Russian separatists on one side and you have the Ukrainian nationalists on the other. And caught in between the middle of all of that are your average everyday citizens that might not, necessarily want to pick sides in this battle. So what's that been like for you?
Мы все живущие в Мариуполе и в принципе в Украине. She wants all politicians, everybody to hear her, that all the ethnic groups that live in Mariupol, Greeks, Russians, Ukrainians, all of them live in peace, and all of them, they want peace and they want happiness. They want to be without war, and they want to continue living in the country which is not doing anything to harm the citizens. They are nice to them. Nobody is bad to the citizens over there. And she just wants to continue living in that country.
So this morning you mentioned to me, we're recording this on a phone conversation because you are currently without internet. And I know the electricity has come on and off multiple times as we've tried to record this. Let me ask you, I know you're in your basement right now with your some friends and family. What is your concern at this moment? The Russian troops are headed your way. Do you think it's going to be some violence in the streets? What are your concerns?
Я хочу, чтобы нас услышали. Мы боимся обстрела. She wants everybody like in the world to hear her. She's like very tired of war, and she's very scared for her life. She's tired of hiding in the basement. She does not want to hide in the basement anymore. She does not want to be scared for her children's life. She wants just peace and stability, and she wants help. She is tired to be on the front lines between Russia and Ukraine, and she would like her family to be somehow evacuated out of there, to be gone, so she is not like scared for her children's life. Мы как раз на границе, идут обстрелы. Спасите моих деток.
Sunday with the command. Infrared on our end is gone. We need.
Well, yeah. So yeah, Tina Desiree, she's a pretty good journalist. She's just trying to talk to somebody living on the front lines currently, and she is having it translated by that person's sister who lives in America. So that is what we're doing. Checking out some frontline interview. And after this, I got Tulsi. I got AOC on Jimmy's take on AOC. I'm going to go over all the protests from the weekend so far. And yeah, let's keep going, guys.
Indeed. Let me ask her this. There's been a lot of conversations regarding the ultranationalist neo-Nazi factions that are there fighting. Putin mentioned in his speech that he wanted to denazify the Ukraine. And we, the Azov Battalion, which is the neo-Nazis on the Ukrainian side, they are definitely part of the conflict. They've gotten some media attention, and I think that's mainly because they're more accessible as far as militia groups are concerned, but they're not the only ones. And I think it bears mention that there are ultranationalist neo-Nazis on the Russian separatist side as well. Russian Unity is the one that comes to mind off the top of my head. So this is something that is true for both sides of the equation, and it gets talked about in the media, and it gets talked about by Putin, by NATO, etc. But I'm wondering if you're a Ukrainian, how much does this part of the conversation actually figure into the bigger picture? Are they really the big problem that they are made out to be, or are they just a smaller part of the conflict?
Для меня, например, Азов в прошлый раз отбил.
He's saying they want to live in Ukraine and
Я
they're
не
very
слышала.
comfortable.
Слушай чуть-чуть.
Yeah, she was saying they want to live in Ukraine. They don't want to live in the war situation. She keeps repeating that. And she says, I don't know like how bad those nationalist groups are. Really for others, maybe they're bad. But for them, last time they helped to defend the city, to protect the city from, she's saying Russian troops, the mayor of the city and the this nationalist group, they helped to defend the city. So they actually were helping people here on Ukrainian side to protect the city.
So, in her opinion, is the general feeling there that they want to be protected from the Russian invasion? And if that's the case, what about the Russian separatist side? How big is that faction? Because it seems like, I mean, obviously no group's monolithic in its beliefs, right? That's part of why we're at the place we're at right now.
Right.
Сепаратистских войсков, в принципе, в Украине,
She
это бред.
basically
Как
keeps
понять
repeating
сепаратизм?
that they just don't want the war. They just don't care about troops, but they don't want the war. They want peace. They want stability, and they want safety for their children.
Understood. So let me ask her this: in her opinion, has Putin actions made the situation worse? Is it such that he's almost throwing a match into a tinderbox and it's now exploding? Was this the inevitable outcome, or how did we get to this place of war now? Because that's what's happening. It's been escalated to that point. It's no longer saber rattling.
Я уверена в том, что, к сожалению, огромному Путин, неправильно себя ведет.
She understands why Putin is doing that. He's trying to protect his own country. He does not want NATO troops facing Russia. He fully understands that. But she keeps saying we are regular citizens. And I want Putin to hear us. I want everyone to hear us. That we want peace. We don't want the war. We want to protect our children. We want to have basically another day tomorrow. Okay, we want to wake up tomorrow. But what's happening, he's trying to protect his own country. He is scared. She thinks he is scared. He's trying to protect himself, and she fully understands that. But as a regular person, she does not want to die either.
Yeah, it seems to me that so many folks are just caught in the middle of an escalating battle that's been going on, for 8 years now, with no solution in sight. What role does NATO play in this? I know some Ukrainians welcome NATO, others do not. It's complex as anything else is, but how does she feel about NATO?
Я, как обычный гражданин Украины, я хочу мира. НАТО, я понимаю, что это...
She said that regular people, they want peace, and they see NATO just as a protection, some kind of protection and stability. She keeps repeating that they want peace. They don't want their children to wake up in fear, to wake up shaken. And she's saying, unfortunately, they are on the front lines. And she just wants peace for your children. And she wants United States and Europe and Putin and Zelensky, everybody to hear her and just stop doing that for the sake of children. And she wants the safety for her children. She's asking for the safety for her children.
So it sounds as if NATO is welcomed, it's because they're seen as somebody that might be.
Okay, that gets us a general idea. General idea of the thing. I just want to move on through all the protests and strikes, anything I could find for the day. These are everything I haven't clipped on this exact story yet. The first one is protesters disrupt an LA mayoral
advertising on YouTube helps me reach engaged customers
in LA.
like
So that is going to be the very first one. This was from 4 days ago. I guess I did not find it earlier, but when you dig and dig, eventually you find new things. And this was new for me.
Los Angeles Mayor Eric Garcetti took the stage tonight at Loyola Marymount University. From left to right, they include Realtor Mel Wilson, City Attorney Mike Fuhrer, Congresswoman Karen Bass, and City Councilman Kevin De Leon and Joe Buscaino. Billionaire businessman Rick Caruso did not attend due to a scheduling problem. Homelessness, crime, and housing affordability dominated the discussion. Protesters interrupted the debate twice. One man rushed the stage, yelling at the candidates. All were quickly escorted out of the room.
Good. You need to interrupt that kind of stuff. Oh, did it go to what I wanted to? Oh, maybe I just let it play. That's fantastic. I can just talk during the muted commercials. So the anti-war protests break out all over Russia. Of course, this is still going to be big-time news and very easy to find. This was the easiest thing I could find, period. Probably public domain. I could probably show it from anybody at this point because, yeah, Americans are going to be rerunning the small clips of this that they can. Pretty sure I've seen this one like 30 times now, the same guy. They must have reclipped that from every angle that they have. Seems like there's more onlookers than there are protesters, huh? Or just curious people of what the fuck's going on than actual protesters. But that's, typical.
Love is in the air here in Wellington today at the anti-mandate protesters as numbers swelled on day 19. A couple were married just below us here at the main protest site in front of a huge crowd watching the ceremony at the main stage, which was decorated with purple ribbons. As the couple were pronounced man and wife, the crowd erupted into cheers and there were people clapping and dancing. Outside the main camp, though, protesters and police continued to clash over recent arrivals, hoping to join the occupied zone around Parliament buildings. Police formed a line blocking access to the bus interchange area where concrete bollards had been set out. Protesters formed their own line with their backs turned to police. A forklift then arrived on the scene to shift the concrete bollards in an effort to tighten the blockade restricting access. It's understood protesters had attempted to shift a separate concrete block, distracting police, with one car making it through a gap in the bus shelter poles and into the camp. Meanwhile, in Auckland, police have allowed the illegal crossing of the Auckland Harbour Bridge today. The protest saw the harbour bridge closed for 90 minutes as about 2,000 people walked across the bridge chanting "Mandates gone by 1st of March" and "Freedom." All protesters were off the bridge by 12:45, with the crowd gathered at Victoria Park in the city. Thanks for checking out our YouTube channel to stay up.
Remember, they're in their summer, so they're not having massive outbreaks. Wild stuff, guys. We are living in wild times. Oh, more commercials? Fantastic. Fantastic. This is good stuff. Georgian. They say it. I can't do it. But yes. Former province of Russia, protesting war. Protesting for their brothers in Ukraine. Not being that far apart. Not being very different. We are all not that different, right? That's a pretty good sized protest. That one is impressive. compared to the anti-war protests in Russia. That's a pretty good anti-war protest for an ex-Russian region, state, territory, not sure how you want to call it. Here's going to be a school protest over mandates.
Good evening, and thanks for joining us for 23 ABC News at 6, also available live on your favorite streaming platform. I'm Brianna Willis. The Tehachapi Unified School District has closed its schools through Monday. In a letter to families, the district says it has been a difficult time to keep students safe in their learning environment and even their staff, which has caused mixed reactions from families. 23 ABC's Taylor Levesque joins us from the Live Center with more on what forced the district to make this move. Taylor.
Unified School District Superintendent says the decision to close was made for the safety and best interest of students and staff. She says anger and frustration expressed from students and parents supporting both sides of the mask mandate has caused disruption in the classroom, and administration has been stretched thin. Superintendent Stacy Larson Everson says while the district has had little to no issues from students, staff, and parents related to the school mask mandate, in a statement sent to 23 ABC, she says for some students, parents, and staff, their willingness to comply with the mandate is no longer present. In response to the mandate, based on some pictures we've received, TUSD parents and students have started protests at some Tehachapi schools by holding up signs outside of campus. Tehachapi Unified School District parent Brandy Reel says while she hasn't taken part in these protests, she supports them and was surprised but relieved when she read the letter.
I honestly think the district is trying to do what's best and give us the choice. I noticed in the letter that she did say she went beyond just the mask mandate thing, and she was like, and we don't want it tied to vaccinations, which I thought was just like a really bold statement, and I appreciated it.
Larson Everson says COVID-19 cases within students and staff in the district has dropped and attendance rates have risen. Larson Everson says 93.7% of students in the district attended school on Thursday, February 17th. In addition to the letter sent to families.
All right, let's move on. Sudan had protests calling for a civilian ran government.
Both. Yeah, what do you mean?
They had some pretty wild protests. Again, this is calling for a fully civilian government. Sudan and South Sudan have been split, and they're kind of both ran by tyrannical puppet regimes of the UK, France, and America, oversight, corporate rule. And they want to have some sort of democracy, some sort of say in their government. How dare they? So they're out in pretty solid numbers, out and protesting. Real good numbers.
وناشد الشعب السوداني يخرجوا كلهم لإسقاط الحكومة الدكتاتورية، الحكومة تحت الغم تحتغل الثوار، تحتغل كل من يمشي ضدها. نحن لن نستسلم، حننتصر إن شاء الله.
That's what it takes, guys. I mean, elections don't do everything. You need to have ground swells of people. You need to have representatives that will listen to you. So yeah, you need to have elections, but you need to have ground swells of people. We need to strike, we need to protest, and we need to push things by sheer numbers. And then maybe we'll get legislation, that's how it's happened in the teens, 1915, 1912, when there was tons of protests. That's how we got child labor out. That's how we got 8-hour days. That's how we got weekends. We could do it again. We need to be out in the streets protesting, or else nothing will change. Which is why I call for a general strike, and which is why I call for end all sanctions. They all tie together. right. One more big thing of protests happened right here in Florida today.
Protesters in Stewart saying today the Don't Say Gay bill isn't the way to go. They met at the Roosevelt Bridge denouncing the controversial legislation. House Bill 1557 and Senate Bill 1834, officially known as the Parental Rights in Education, but widely known as the Don't Say Gay bill, has stirred a lot of emotion. The House bill was passed on Thursday. The bill would ban instruction on sexual orientation and gender identity in kindergarten through third grade, or in a manner that is not age appropriate or developmentally appropriate for students. Many in opposition say they fear that it could act as a ban on lessons on LGBTQ history and discussions of identity.
Important because our youth are transgender. You know, we're going to put them in a situation with mental health issues and things like that and whatnot, and it's just it's hateful. It's hateful, and you know, like it's as if we're going backwards.
Yeah. This they say, you know, held in Stewart. If you saw my show Thursday night, I want to say this was like, I mean, there was a half dozen there was at least 6 or 8 of these protests happening all over Florida today against, well, yesterday now, but against all of this. So I would have loved to go on, but it would have taken me twice as long to drive to one. There was none in Tampa, unfortunately, and Orlando would have been the closest, but in off season, maybe, but not during season. I'm not going that far during the season time. I'm just stuck here, guys. Sorry. All right, my one day off. I'm not spending 5 hours in a car. So yeah, that was the protest of the day. That was all of that. So now we're moving on to a few days ago, or yesterday. Yesterday, this was posted by Tulsi, and I guess she's proud of this moment. So she's proud of speaking at CPAC right here in Florida. Kind of gross. Not making me too happy about that. I thought she was maybe more of a progressive, but a real progressive wouldn't be speaking at CPAC. That's for fucking sure. So yeah, I haven't watched this yet. I was told about it, and I had no opinion on it. And it's Interview Sunday, and interview and debate. A speech from this, I guess, is something I can react to because I was a fan of hers, and she has disappointed me. And you should never become a fan of somebody because they will disappoint you. Think critically.
That's what I'm talking about. Thanks so much, Larry, and thanks, Matt and Mercy, and just thanks all of you for your kind and warm welcome. You are making me feel right at home. You know, before I get started, I just wanted to ask if we could just for a moment and talk about Ukraine and what is going on there. I had never been to Eastern Europe until I actually went on my R&R leave for my first deployment in Iraq. Instead of going back to Hawaii, I chose to go to Eastern Europe. I went to Poland, visited Auschwitz, visited the ghettos in Warsaw, and then I went to Ukraine, and I made some wonderful friends there. People who I became closer to as the years went on, and like so many people who are stuck in Ukraine right now. Many of them are stuck in Kyiv, others are trying to make their way to the border with Poland, afraid, worried for their loved ones, their husbands unable to leave, and it's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking to see this tragedy play out. So I just wanted to ask if we could just pause for a moment of silence and send our prayers for their safety and for their well-being. Thank you. You know, I gotta say, when Matt and I first spoke on the phone about my coming here, we both had a similar reaction to each other, saying, yeah, there's gonna probably be some strong thoughts that people were gonna share with both of us when they find out that I'm coming here, and we both kind of, I imagined you were nodding, Matt, I was nodding, but we're like, you know what, bring it on. And they brought it on. So it wouldn't surprise you to know that on social media and Twitter, the blue check marks started lighting up, and you know, I kind of started to see coming from the so-called progressives, the usual things coming out saying, Tulsi Gabbard is going to CPAC. She's a traitor. Hillary was right. Get her out of here. And then I started to see the things coming out from so-called conservatives, mostly directed at Matt, saying, how dare you? Don't you know she's a Democrat? Cancel her, disinvite her, lock the doors, don't let her in. While these things can be easy to laugh about sometimes, unfortunately, this kind of reaction, this kind of tribalism is not limited to social media. It is something that's happening far too often and far too common across our country, where one section of our country sticks to our own tribe. We only hang out with and listen to and talk to people who we agree with, and we turn our backs.
Tulsi, you've been only talking to and hanging out with the right wing for like the last year. I would say like, oh, it's, all you can get on, but it's not like she's been making the rounds on like, leftist podcasters or anything. It's not like she's been on Jimmy and Lee and doing all those tours or anything. So no, she's just been on the right side right now. So she is in she just picked a different group of bubble because she was outcast from one. I don't know.
And reject anyone who is not part of that tribe. But this kind of tribalism is dangerous, and it's emblematic of an erosion of a spiritual foundation in this country. It's emblematic of this lack of recognition that we are all God's children, that we are one nation under God. And knowing that inspires us. It inspires us to look within and find that fundamental respect and care that we should have for one another. And so when I came out here, I said aloha because this is what aloha really means. Everyone's heard the word aloha. Most people think it means hello and goodbye, but there's a reason why we greet each other with aloha, and it's because of the deeper meaning there where it says, I recognize that we are all children of God, and I come to you with respect, and I come to you with this heartfelt love that no matter where we come from, the color of our skin, our religion, or even our politics, we respect each other in that spirit of aloha.
I definitely am, Raw Eggshell. Just finished one. This
spirit of aloha is actually what is at the heart of our Declaration of Independence. It is what is the foundation of our Constitution. When we say we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Our freedom comes from God, not from any other person, not from anyone in government. Our freedom comes from God, and to recognize others as children of God is to appreciate that we belong to God and no one else. So naturally, therefore, no one has the right to take away that intrinsic freedom which God has given us.
I'll spark one up of Mateo Blue. It's my indica for my nighttime. Oh. This is taking a little bit, her talking at CPAC. I am a true progressive. She said some things that I liked during the presidential primaries. Smoking Kamala was freaking fantastic. I have to say that was one of my favorite things. That's literally what I do. Are you stoned watching news? Because I'm a news junkie, man. I like laughing at things because I see through the bullshit and it's funny to me. So yeah, that's what I do.
This is the foundation of the social construct of the United States of America. This is what is at the foundation of our Constitution. And we heard a lot from Glenn tonight about the First Amendment, about free speech, about the Bill of Rights. And our First Amendment, as you well know, says Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press or the right of the people peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for redress of grievances. This foundation of freedom is what makes us who we are as Americans. This foundation of freedom, for me, is deeply ingrained in who I am, both as a soldier and as an American. That oath that I took to support and defend the Constitution of the United States of America against all enemies, foreign and domestic, is one that is seared into my heart. Now I know...
Pretty sure she still serves too, which is pretty funny to me. because she's not running for anything currently. And again, she's not currently running for anything for 2022. Doesn't mean anything. I've heard a lot of people saying that she has aspirations for governor of Hawaii, but that's not exactly a straight. Like, she seems to be running Republican, right? Like, if she ran again, because she's only talking to the right now. I mean, I don't know. I can still agree with her on certain points, right? I can still agree with somebody on the right on certain points. It's fine. She doesn't seem to be running like she'd be running for a Democrat seat anytime.
We have many veterans here in the hall tonight, many who are watching from home. Those of you who have worn or still wear the uniform, you know exactly what I'm talking about. You know how serious we take this oath. And like the many great Americans that we've had the privilege of serving alongside, the great Americans who have come before us, upon whose shoulders we stand, we are united in this unwavering commitment to freedom. We recognize that while we may disagree with what you say, we are willing to lay our lives down to defend your right to say it. That is freedom.
Yeah, I will give, she is a vet. She has served. She's been on tours. She actually literally does the same thing my friend does. She is a field, a field attendant and works for the field medics and such during wartime. So that's what my friend does. She's in the Army Reserve, just like my friend, like literally the same field. He's just, she's more my age, and he is in his early 30s. So yeah, just a little different in age.
Core of who we are as a nation. It is what makes our country that shining city on the hill. So as long as we're committed to this foundation of freedom that's enshrined in our Constitution, our Bill of Rights, we can recognize our differences and work together based on that common ground. Coming from that common foundation of...
And that's what I'm talking about in a general strike. I think we need to come together and, work on things that we agree with. And if the left and right only can agree that the poor, we need to tax corporations, we need to take, stop billionaires' abstraction of wealth and give some money back to working class. And if that's the only two things we can agree on, we can't agree on Medicare for all. We can't agree on, we can stop, agree on, taking out the war machine a bit, I bet. There's certain things we can agree on. And let's general strike with those things that we agree on. We can come together on the things that we agree on and build a foundation of something that we can push these assholes to do. These CPAC fucking people to do, that meet at parties and stroke each other off for a whole weekend.
Freedom, we can overcome the great obstacles and challenges that we face. But if we are not committed to this freedom that is so clearly spelled out in the Bill of Rights, we are doomed to fail as a country. Unfortunately, we have too many Americans, including leaders in positions of great power in our country, who are not at all committed to upholding the Constitution. We have many Americans who don't even know what the Bill of Rights are. They think free speech is something that should only be left to those who agree with them, saying, hey, if your speech offends me or if it offends anyone, then you should not be allowed to say it. This is where we are as a country. We have too many people in positions of power whose foremost responsibility is to protect our freedoms and uphold our God-given rights, and yet they are the ones who are actually trying to take these rights away from us. This is the biggest threat to our country. It is not coming from some foreign country. It is coming from power elite here at home and their co-conspirators in the mainstream media and the security state who are working to undermine our freedoms from within. Now, just the latest strategy and tactic that they're using is to try to undermine our free speech by taking it upon themselves to say they've got the responsibility to protect us from so-called misinformation. So basically, they're saying that they're going to protect us from that which they claim is not true. The notion that we must just blindly accept and follow as truth, that which the government or those in power tells us is true, goes against the very essence of our Constitution and Bill of Rights. This was created as a resounding rejection of the reign of kings and churches and authorities. There's a reason the preamble of the Constitution begins with, "We the people." There's a reason our Declaration of Independence says that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. Why is it important that we say these words? Why is it important that we remember them, that we actually understand why they serve as the bedrock of this country? The reason why it's important is because in defiance of the Constitution, we now have leaders in our government working with their mouthpieces in the mainstream media and big tech, doing exactly what our founders rejected.
A lot of them.
And they're doing so backed by the most lethal force on earth, as they appoint themselves as the sole authority and voice of truth, of information. They get to decide what is true and what is false. They get to decide what is information or misinformation. And they expect we, the people, to just blindly accept and follow. This is where we're at today. It is in direct opposition to the Constitution that the power elite is actively suppressing voices, opinions, and information that they don't like. That those who dare to even question the authority are accused of spreading misinformation and are therefore targeted and smeared and canceled and silenced. We've seen their playbook over and over again. Discredit and censor anyone who challenges them. Why? Because they know that their propaganda will not hold up to scrutiny. That rather than engage in debate on substance or even answer very simple questions about their policies, they instead immediately resort to smears and name-calling. I'm sure you've heard them all before. I certainly have, like today. Tito's got his hand raised. Russian asset, white supremacist, bigot, racist, extremist, traitor. But what's even more dangerous than this threat of being canceled is the federal government wielding its power and might to punish those who dare to question or disagree with them and their policies. I'll give you one example. If you go on DHS.gov, you'll find Biden's Department of Homeland Security summarizes the three factors that led them to declare that we are in a heightened state of a domestic terrorism threat. The first of those three factors is, quote, the proliferation of false or misleading narratives which sow discord or undermine public trust in U.S. government institutions. I want to read that again because it's important. The proliferation of false or misleading narratives, which
yeah, she is just absolutely going for something or another, right? Like, she is setting herself up for something. I don't know why somebody wanted me to watch this, but they did, and yeah, I mean, good for her, right? Hooray, she's trying to do something. I don't care. You can agree with somebody 25% of the time. She is not a progressive, and she's not really a Democrat. And I've heard that a lot of Republicans like her, and she seems to be in the Republican bubble, which means, yeah, she seems to be doing these tours based on something. So it's interesting, but it's, yeah.
Discord or undermine public trust in U.S. government institutions. Number one factor.
They could have been mad at me. Yeah, that's fair. I think they know that I voted for her in the primary last election cycle there. Just I don't know. I gave up on her as soon as she freaking endorsed Biden. Like, screw you. I should have gave up on her when she voted for Pelosi. That's horrible. You should not vote for Pelosi and call yourself a progressive. So there's, 2 strikes. She's done 2 horrible things. But you can still agree. You can still agree with some issues that she speaks on. So yeah, if she does a great job 35% of the time, you have to take that and go, great. She's with us on this at least, right? And you got to build that correlation around, because yeah, people suck. There's people of privilege suck a lot too. These people in government that have been paid by some sort of deep state or another, their pockets went somewhere at some point. To be as up as high as she has been in the Democratic Party, she had to have been handpicked by one of the deep billionaires that fund the Democratic Party, right? And those billionaires fund both parties usually. So
if you replace the word U.S. government with the word church, we can see how
Yeah,
those in
she's not a
power see
civilian.
themselves as
Yeah,
the
no,
high
she's not a
priest in
civilian.
a secular theocracy.
I call the working class, the 75% of us that are real people. They say 99%, but really 10% are rich, but there's 25% are the cush. The other 75% of us are living a real life. She's not one of the people. She's not a working class. She's not. She hasn't been a working class. She's never lived like that. Her dad was like a freaking congressperson when she was a child, so she had money and her family had wealth. Not wealth, but her family was well off.
This explains why they see those who disagree with them as heretics. And so it's not surprising that those who reject their leadership or views, these are the people who are targeted by Biden's attorney general as domestic terrorists, simply for holding anti-authority views. Basically, what they're telling us is you are an enemy of the state if you dare to oppose or even question the president, his administration, or his policies. Shut up, step back, fall in line, or we're coming after you.
And I'll agree with that. I'm going to leave it her there. But I have to agree with that, right? I mean, that is absolutely, if you oppose the mainstream media narrative, you get called a Russian asset, you get called a racist, you get called a bigot. The clip from Jimmy Dore the other day was freaking hilarious, and that's what we're going to move on to next. So, and she's freaking great with drone bombs. Like, she's okay with saving her brother in arms with drone bombing, which has been proven to kill 90% pedestrians, 90% civilians. So I'm not great with somebody who's okay with drone bombs. She is going for the storm look. I like that. Yeah, she is trying to pull off a storm look. And I think, honestly, the person that probably sent this to me, they are the kind of person that's like, oh, she's hot. And it's just like, dude, you know what? Somebody's political opinion, somebody who has a political career, you can't talk like that. That's ridiculous. Talk about your stupid actor like that, like your storm actor. That's an acceptable conversation. Let's not have that conversation. I want to move on to Jimmy. I gave that a chance. Somebody told me to give it a chance. I think 15 minutes at a little bit fast forward is plenty of a freaking chance. And I wanted to talk about the AOC spews nonstop BS New Yorker interview. I've been working a lot at bartender. I have not had a chance to hear about the AOC spews nonstop BS. And he starts off going, oh, sorry, I'm late to the game. So I am super late to the game. I apologize. Yeah. Oh, freaking, yeah. Ooh. So I'm going to let's try this out for a bit, huh?
It was featured in the New Yorker. And it was quite an interview. A lot of people have already talked about it. We're a little bit late to the game, but I think this was from February 14th, so it's not that long ago. It's our Valentine. He was our
That's
Valentine.
fair.
And the headline is Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez an insider now? What do you mean now? Now? What do you mean now?
You're doing an article on the New Yorker on her.
Now? You mean now? What do you mean now? Is she now an insider? Now. Okay, well, when we spoke earlier this month by Zoom, Ocasio-Cortez talked at length not only about the impasse the Democrats now face, but also the general atmosphere of working in Congress. Honestly, it is a shit show, she said.
Yeah.
It's scandalizing every single day. What is surprising to me is how it never stops being scandalizing. You don't say, never stop surprising you. I guess you got to say the
Anybody, she hasn't filled her way up. She was planning to be up there. Anybody that gets that much coverage, anybody that gets that much of a following from the news is meant to win. And like anytime I look at big money in a congressperson, there's always a correlation with how much the news actually shows them. Because you can have a brand new person with very, very few great ideas or anything, but they'll just get massive coverage from CNN and MSNBC, and they're always getting asked their opinion because they have deep state connections with the CIA and a ton of money from big tech. And it's always interesting to see. Yeah, AOC is funded by Google and Facebook big time, so she has big money ties. So they're gonna promote the shit out of her, and mainstream media is just gonna follow suit. She has not filled her way up. She is planted there. They're gonna force her ass upon her. We're gonna have her shoved down our fucking throats until we take it. Like, oh, AOC.
Prayer then. Hi, AOC. God grant me the courage to change what I can, the serenity to accept the things I can't, and a $30,000 ball gown to wear to this thing at the Met. Is that how the serenity prayer goes? I don't know.
Yeah, she went to the Met, hung out with millionaires with the ha ha ha, tax the rich, ha ha ha. And it's a bunch of rich people like, yeah, tax us, ha ha ha. Jesus.
The interview took place on February 1st and has been edited for length and for clarity. Remnick says much of the Biden administration's agenda in Congress has pretty much stalled. A term that began with lofty FDR-like ambitions is now at a standstill.
That's perfect.
How would you rate the president's performance after a year? Is it still in the A+ range, AOC? Because that's what you guys were saying before. And
Like, she's such a liar. When she ran, she said she would never vote for Pelosi. She wasn't worried about being a second term, even getting her second term. Guess what? After your second term, your lifetime benefits kick in. So now that she's in 2 terms, she can fight the system, guys. She has lifetime benefits. She can fight the system. She'll still have health care if she gets kicked out, she loses her seat. But she is planted. She was planted by the deep state or CIA or just big tech. Maybe she's just planted by big tech. Who knows?
now we have a whole year. And he says there are some things that are outside of the president's control. And there's very little one can say about that.
I did not know about that. Levi Ulysses. But I still love that fact that she came down here to Florida. She made a big deal about the fact that people wanted to fuck her, and that's why they were hating on her. And then she got fucking COVID down here. I really enjoyed that. That was that made me happy. Cause yeah, first of all, come down. Like she rips on DeSantis constantly, and then she gets drunk and she goes on a Twitter raid when she's drunk in freaking Miami area, and then gets COVID. Like, oh, hypocritical bitch. But I did not know about that. That's interesting.
But Joe Manchin and Kristen Sinema. But I think there are some things within the president's control, and his hesitancy around them has contributed to a situation that isn't as optimal. Really? That's how she describes it now. Less than optimal. What is that? Some kind of new Common Core grading that I never heard about? He was just an A+ a year ago, and now he's less than optimal. So what is that, like an A-? Less?
No, seriously. As a professional human being, wouldn't you put your freaking phone down? Like, if my job depended on me being reasonable, I would put my phone down if I was drunk on vacation with my boyfriend for the fucking weekend. Like, what are you doing? Put your phone down. Or put Twitter off, delete Twitter for the weekend. Put that app on silent. Like, literally people were like, oh, I thought, that kind of person would have an assistant doing Twitter for you when you're on vacation. Instead, that idiot gets drunk and does her own Twitter.
Optimal. Okay. AOC she continued saying, my concern is that we're getting into analysis paralysis. And we don't have much. Oh, that's from the here to the now to the when to the what?
Oh, yeah, she talks in fucking
circles. And we really
circles.
don't have much time.
Right, Jimmy? She talks in circles.
She is such a bullshit.
She talks in circles. When she talked at that freaking the stands with the forced of the rent moratorium bullshit, she when somebody actually asked real questions, they turned music up and blared the music, and she's such a bullshitter. She's horrible. I love Jimmy Attacks Her.
We should really not take this.
He is a true leftist. He is not a Republican because he doesn't like AOC. He's just a far left. And far left and far right have more in common than the far left has with Democrats. Honestly, most of the time, I get along with libertarians better than I get along with freaking Democrats sometimes. I swear. Republicans, Democrats, I think they have more in common than progressives and libertarians.
Present political moment for granted and do everything that we can. Oh no, analysis paralysis. We've become a nation of anaplegics. Somebody should do something. She's right. Somebody should do something. If you see something, say something. That's step one. Good work, AOC. Somebody should do. Boy, if only you knew a squad of people who actually had power and could vote as a block. If only we should do.
Dictators would be, I think they're I think they're just all like greed. Like they go there because they have no way to obtain just massive amounts of greed and power, and they're blinded by everything. Like the few, again, I'm a bartender and server, and the few that I've ran into outside of like local, but I'm saying like the few bigger names, the few, I can't say the names, but the few like up in the Congress and Senate area, those people are just egotistical sociopaths, and they just spin on a dime. So like, they're just sociopaths. They're just not good people. I've met a lot of rich people, and you get hit or miss on some, but the handful I've met of those are just not good people.
Everything we can. She's doing nothing. They're doing nothing.
Right.
At the beginning of last year, many of us in the progressive wing, but not just the progressive wing, were saying we don't want to repeat a lot of this hand-wringing that happened in 2010 when there was this very precious opportunity in the Senate for things that happened. There was another time. I remember another time when there was this moment for things to happen when you guys were the swing votes and could have controlled the House. You could have controlled legislation, and you didn't on purpose. I remember that. That was very much like that 2010 thing you're talking about. That's what I think. So here's the interviewer says to her, people in the Biden White House would argue that the margins are the margins and Manchin's politics are what they are. He comes from a state that is dominated by a much more conservative vote, and cinema is unpredictable. They would argue that they made concession after concession and that they still got nowhere. AOC responds to that by saying, the presidency is so much larger than just the votes in the legislature. This is something that we saw with President Obama. I think we're seeing this dynamic perhaps extend a little bit into the Biden administration with a reluctance to use executive power. A reluctance to use executive power. Yeah, like, I don't know, going back to the...
Yeah, the whole Steen thing, just remember the whole Ukraine buildup started, if you want to be real deep with stuff, the Ukraine buildup started right about the time Maxwell was supposed to be getting sentenced, and now that story's been buried by this bigger story, right? So you can't talk about the bill, you can't talk about the Jeff, but yeah, this whole World War was started right around the time Ghislaine was supposedly gonna try to, plea deal and give some names and such. And some of the names she can give that's worldwide government breaking. So timing of everything is always suspect, man. This shit is suspect as hell.
The Obama President Droney McKill list, maybe going back to that. Or does she mean use it to do anything not for mega corporatism? Is that what she means? A reluctance to use executive power? Does she mean that he's reluctant to use it to do anything that's not for mega corporatism? Because that's true. I mean, not using your power to force any meaningful change, that's what she's saying. He's not using his power to force any meaningful change. She's saying Biden is not using his power to push for any meaningful change. Like, who does Biden think he is? A member of the squad or something?
Yeah, I don't... like, I haven't been watching the troop movement, but I do know that we're sending troops to Iraq and Syria pretty soon too, guys. I happen to know that one for a fact. And yeah, let's see. And I did actually, I mean, I don't know about the slave trade currently, but the sex trade, sex markets, I have met somebody whose daughter was kidnapped and sold into sex trade in Mexico. Like her daughter was disappeared into Central America at 14 years old. And that shit is still very much a thing. They say, they can kind of track the FBI. There's 2 in Northern California every 6 months. 2 teenage girls abducted from Northern California every 6 months. Currently, that's a thing. And they're sold into Central America into sex trade. So, just having physically talked to one of those people and having my gut wrenched for like 36 hours afterwards, like my whole brain fried after that. Yeah, there's definitely some truth to all of it, and we need to never stop focusing on it until it's completely exposed. Like, right? Like it and yeah.
The interviewer says, "What is it like day to day being a member of this institution, which I have to say from the outside looks like a shit show?" Okay. Well, she says, honestly, it is a shit show.
Oh, God.
That would make a great title for the Netflix sequel. That doc they did about the squad. It was called Knock Down the House. Remember that? That would be a doc.
Yeah, technology's kind of caught up with them, I think. Like, they were freaking, they had control of everything. They had the world in their power, guys, and they those powerful people there, they let technology get caught up with them. And we can now hold people more accountable with independent media than we ever could before. So luckily there are platforms like this that we can, get out there and be still heard. People like Jimmy that'll still speak truth.
I think it should be called, honestly, it's a shit show. What is?
Yeah, you go. We need. I've been saying. I think me and Graham Elwood and a few others have been saying that for years. Please, where are you? Where are you, hackers? Get these guys' info and leak it out to every indie site in the planet, because we need this to be a done deal.
Surprising to me is how it never stops being scandalizing.
Anything to trigger the general
Some folks
strike.
perhaps get used to it or desensitized to the many different things that may be broken. But sometimes to be in a room with some of the most powerful people in the country and see the ways that they make decisions, sometimes they're just susceptible to groupthink, susceptible to self-delusion. They're not bad people. That's what she's saying. And she's describing herself. That's what she's trying to do. Sketch it out for us. What does it look like? Yeah, give us the micro and the macro. Give us the how to get to the
remember
where.
When she said that stupid shit?
To the what?
Oh,
Sandy
God.
the bartender, pour us some truth bombs. Because that was her name.
I didn't know, so I was hearing something else about how she, so back to AOC, that conversation is, that conversation, if I get too far into it, I'll say some names that'll get me in trouble. So, yeah, AOC, she wasn't even like a full-time bartender. Like, that wasn't how she made her living. She just bartended part-time so that she could say she was a bartender and a working class person. Like, that was a bullshit story in the cover. So I didn't know that.
Before she ran for office, her name was Sandy. They used to call her Sandy the bartender, and now she's AOC the congressperson who wants to be president like JFK. You see where she got the AOC? She says the Build Back Better Act is the vast majority of Biden's agenda. The infrastructure plan, as important as it is much smaller. So we were talking about pairing these two things together. The Progressive Caucus puts up a fight, and then somewhere around October, there comes a critical juncture. I do vaguely remember this, but she's describing it in corporate gibberish, so I forgot what the fuck we were talking about. She continues, the president is then under enormous pressure from the media. There's this idea that the president can't get things done and that his presidency is at risk. It's what I find to be just a lot of sensationalism. However, the ramifications of that were being very deeply felt. And you have people running tough races, and he needs to win. Enormous pressure from the media. Can't you just have tech firms censor them? Why don't you just do that? She then went on and said, and so I'm sitting there in the group with some of the most powerful people in the country talking about how if we pass the infrastructure bill right now, then this will be what the president can campaign on. The American people will give him credit for it. He can win his presidency on it. If we don't pass it now, then we've risked democracy itself. Really? Did you know that democracy itself hinged on Build Back Better? Wait a minute. Didn't that fail? Oh, my God. Has democracy died? What a shit show. He says, you've used a phrase, if we have a democracy 10 years from now. Do you think we won't?
Yeah, I don't vote Republican or Democrat. I vote third party, independent. A lot of times I end up going in and just voting down ballot and not voting for congressmen or senators or anything because there's nobody up there that's worth voting for. But typically, you know, you got to pay attention to your bills, pay attention. There's a lot of, you know, as a stony progressive, I care about, you know, pot legislation, trying to make sure that people get out and vote for, like in Florida, there's going to be, there's always bills to change our pot legislation and possibly get it recreational down here. And a lot of states are trying to get things going. Yeah, as far as Jeff's list, man, that's freaking his list is so intense. It's ridiculous. Hollywood elite, world elite, it's insane. Birthday party blaze. Like complete Hollywood elite. Yeah, it's insane. Oprah, I'm like Oprah, Jim Carrey, Tom Hanks, Will Smith, like all the biggest names. Every single one of the biggest names. Like all the biggest names.
Well, why start now? We don't have one now. We don't have a democracy now. And that's not hyperbole. This has been proven by the Cambridge study. We do not have a democracy. We live in an oligarchy. Your vote doesn't matter.
Ellen DeGeneres, another one that was a regular towards the end of the teens, the 20 teens, after it was known, but she was still going to the ranch in freaking New Mexico or whatever the fuck it was. Like, yeah. It was all bad. It was all very bad. And they can all be gutted out. The cancer that is our disgrace of humankind at the moment. Can't even progress humankind because we have a bunch of freaking idiots up top that are the worst of the worst. And yes, I follow Whitney Webb, so that's who I follow for that information for myself.
AOC responds that Sandy responds and says, I think there's a very real risk that we will not have a democracy, she says. What we risk is having a government that perhaps postures as a democracy and may try to pretend that it is, but it isn't. Party. That's what we have right now, you fucking liar.
Oh,
you unbelievable bullshitter. Oh, my. Anyway, we will risk. What we risk is having a government that perhaps postures as a democracy. That's what we risk. And by what we will risk, she means what has been happening for a long time, since a long time ago. He then asks, is it healthy or not for the Democratic Party for Nancy Pelosi to remain in place as the Speaker, as leader of the Democratic caucus in the House? That's the question. She responds, it's really all about a specific moment that we're in. We are in such a delicate moment of the day-to-day, particularly with the threats to our democracy. I believe that at the end of the day, there's going to be a generational change in our leadership. That is just simple fact. Now, when that particular moment happens,
Whenever a Democrat talks about democracy, I always try to remember that Democrats are okay with cross-check. For freaking fact. Democrats are okay with cross-check, which gets rid of millions of minority names off the ballots every fucking election.
I think it's a larger question of conditions and circumstances. So if I read that right, what she's saying is, yeah, we're going to have a change of power inside the Democratic Party because Nancy Pelosi will eventually die of old age. I think that's what she's saying. She says, you don't want to go near this one. No, she'll definitely go near this one. She'll just babble inanely about it and hope that you accept it. That's what she's going to do. Well, let's see. It's a tough question. It's not even just a question of the speaker. It's a question of our caucus. I wish the Democratic Party had more stones. I wish our party was capable of truly supporting both leadership that can address root causes. You son of a bitch. You saying that into a fucking mirror? She hasn't. Her stones, the only stones AOC has ever shown is when she said, I was committing violence against her, which actually showed her cowardice. She's a coward who will never stand up to power or the establishment. She is the establishment. She wants to be the establishment.
Yeah, she wants to be the establishment. She could have stood up now. She could have stood up in several fucking real moments, and she's always chosen Mama Bear Pelosi's freaking route. So yeah, she's straight up establishment.
Has 12 million Twitter followers, and she's used them to do what? Nothing. She tells you to go organize. Why don't you tell those 12 million people to go put some pressure on someone and the Democratic Party and have some stones? Because AOC is a phony. That's why. And if you want to spend time voting and raising money for campaigning for those people, then have at it. Good for you. The rest of the world has moved on.
You know, Jimmy, I just want to remind everybody that Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez in April 2021, she saluted the Biden administration, saying the new president had exceeded progressives' expectations.
That's right. That's who she is. That's who she is.
Those were her stones.
And now she's saying, I wish our party was capable of truly supporting bold leadership that can address root causes. So what she's really saying is this whole thing doesn't work. That's what she's saying. The whole thing doesn't work. We didn't use our power when we had it. The squad didn't vote as a block. We'll never use our leverage. And nobody else is ever going to do it either. She's describing who she is.
Yeah, it's wild that so many Ukraine and Russian posts are like happening everywhere on the political chat and just chatting and news areas. There's a lot. Yeah, it's it is wild.
I wish I had more stones.
That's CNN.
I wish I was capable of truly supporting bold leadership that can address root causes. That's what.
Are they trying to bombard us with it so that we'll get addicted to it and turn to CNN again? Go back to CNN and Fox and the war porn mainstream media?
AOC's saying.
No, thank you. I'd rather not.
And Kyle Kalinske will tell you she's not corrupt because Kyle Kalinske is inventing new words to defend politicians because Kyle Kalinski's got Washington brain or whatever the fuck it is he calls it. So there you go. So Ryan Grimm from the D.C. bureau chief, he will endorse this. Yes, she's right. And all of her fucking apologists will endorse this and say, yes, she's right. She's a great person. and you should give her money, and you should donate. They'll never tell you to stop giving her money. Ryan Grimm, Cenk Uygur, Kyle Kalinske, those fucks, they'll never tell you to stop donating to Democrats or voting for them, or Crystal Ball. They'll never tell you that. And so enjoy their shows. They're getting Russia wrong at the top of their lungs. And they're holding conferences where they want to give you your money to more Democratic politicians. That's their big idea. You need to give more money to new Democrats. That's their big idea. I'm not fucking kidding. I don't know.
Yeah, I've seen so many ads lately for the donate $5 from different Dems, like just trying to bait us into donating to those jackasses because they gotta win these midterms so we can do some real work. You haven't done anything for us the last 2 years. How the hell do you expect anybody to give a shit about you? I really don't know anymore. I don't know why anybody would care about these. Like I'm gonna push for third party. I'm gonna look for candidates that are worth in my own area, and I hope there's some candidates out there that are worth voting for this year. But mostly, I'm just going to push for the ballot initiatives this election, and hope that we can get some good people to run for elections in 2024. Okay, well. Yeah, and Congress is fucking the whole lobbying paid for, and they're paid for, like they have to do what lobbyists say, but at the same time they have to spend their whole time calling for donations so that they can do what lobbyists say. It's such a fuck system. Ugh. Anyhow. I'm going to finish with an old school clip. So, thanks for joining me, guys, if you guys are new. But, yeah, Sunday is usually for interviews, debates. This was talking about an interview. And now I'm going to finish with a debate moving into this election cycle. And this is Ford versus Carter, the first presidential debate from 1976. And this is my old school clip of the day. Lobbying should be cut out of the fucking system, man. It's ridiculous. The fact that APAC writes bills for people is ridiculous. The fact that corporations that write bills for things in their own sector then hand it to a congressman, and then it's just into the Rand Corporation. No. Is that another word that's going to say that's going to get me freaking kicked off? All right, 3 a.m. I will. I'd like to hear defense for lobbyists. Well, I also, in serving, actually deal with a lot more lobbyists than politicians, and they seem to think that their job is like fucking literally important. They seem to think that they're fucking important. It's so ridiculous. And then they have it's the grossest thing I've ever seen. Hold on, I want to get this in before you guys move my comments. All right, I got that written down. I'm gonna check that out later. Thank you, Zom. But yeah, they really think that they're important, and it's they get paid very well. They don't spend any money because all their shits, when they go out, they go golfing for free. They go freaking, everything's paid by the corporation. Like, you think they're spending money on politicians? No, it's the corporations it's these PACs and corporations that are spending money on the politicians and the lobbyists. So the lobbyists don't pay for shit, and they have a fucking pretty fat salary. It's disgusting and gross. But I do like watching these old debates. They're kind of interesting, and gets us into like how debates happened before the Republicans and Democrats ran the debates, which is what they do now. Just one question from each guy before I take off tonight. already on hour number 2, and I got to go back to work tomorrow, so let's do
President,
this.
Governor Carter. Governor, in an interview with the Associated Press last week, you said you believe these debates would alleviate a lot of concern that some voters have about you. Well, one of those concerns, not an uncommon one about candidates in any year, is that many voters say they don't really know where you stand. Now, you have made jobs your number one priority, and you have said you are committed to a drastic reduction in unemployment. Can you say now, Governor, in specific terms, what your first step would be next January if you are elected to achieve that?
Yes. First of all is to recognize the tremendous economic strength of this country and to set the putting back to work of our people as a top priority. This is an effort that ought to be done primarily by strong leadership in the White House, the inspiration of our people, the tapping of business, agriculture, industry, labor, and government at all levels to work on this project. We'll never have an end to the inflationary spiral, and we'll never have a balanced budget until we get our people back to work. There's several things that can be done specifically that are not now being done. First of all, to channel research and development funds into areas that will provide large numbers of jobs. Secondly, we need to have a commitment in the private sector to cooperate with government in matters like housing. Here, a very small investment of taxpayers' money in the housing field can bring large numbers of extra jobs in the guarantee of mortgage loans and the putting forward of 202 programs for housing for older people and so forth to cut down the roughly 20% unemployment that now exists in the construction industry. Another thing is to deal with our needs in the central cities, where the unemployment rate is extremely high, sometimes among minority groups, those who don't speak English or who are black, young people, 40% unemployment. Here, a CCC-type program would be appropriate to channel money into the sharing with private sector and also local and state governments to employ young people who are now out of work. Another very important aspect of our economy would be to increase production in every way possible, to hold down taxes on individuals and to shift the tax burdens onto those who have avoided paying taxes in the past. These kinds of specific things, none of which are being done now, would be a great help in reducing unemployment. There is an additional factor that needs to be done and covered very, very succinctly, and that is to make sure that we have a good relationship between management, business on the one hand, and labor on the other. In a lot of places where unemployment is very high, we might channel specific targeted job opportunities by paying part of the salary of unemployed people and also sharing with local governments the payment of salaries, which would let us cut down the unemployment rate much lower before we hit the inflationary level. But I believe that by the end of the first 4 years of the next term, we could have the unemployment rate down to 3% adult unemployment, which is about 4 to 4.5% overall, controlled inflation rate, and have a balanced growth of about 4 to 6%, around 5%, which would give us a balanced budget.
Governor, in the event you are successful and you do achieve a drastic drop in unemployment, that is likely to create additional pressure on prices. How willing are you to consider an incomes policy? In other words, wage and
really
price
tiny
control.
little quotes.
Well, we now have such a low utilization of our productive capacity, about 73%, I think it's about the lowest since the Great Depression years, and such a high unemployment rate now, 7.9%, that we have a long way to go in getting people to work before we have the inflationary pressures. And I think this would be easy to accomplish, to get jobs down without having the strong inflationary pressures that would be necessary. I would not favor the payment of a given fixed income to people unless they are not able to work. But with tax incentives for the low-income groups, we could build up their income levels above the poverty level and make them more profitable.
No, he is definitely not the
work
topic of the day.
Mr. President, your response? I don't believe that Mr. Carter has been any more specific in this case than he has been on many other instances.
No, you were right. Carter is not the topic of the day. I am finishing with an old school clip because I like to wrap things up with something from the past. Just watching like 10 minutes of the debate. But I have covered on the ground, live, person supposedly from Kiev. I don't know, it's been a long day, so we started out the day with Oliver Stone and JFK, talking about JFK assassination. I talked a little bit about Bitcoin. I guess I could go over Friday's White House press briefing clips, but I don't really feel like it is fucking 3 in the morning. I had to be to work at like 12 hours. So, crypto slavery. Okay.
I noticed particularly that he didn't endorse the Humphrey Hawkins bill, which he has on occasions, and which is included as a part of the Democratic platform. That legislation allegedly would help our unemployment, but we all know that it would have controlled our economy. It would have added $10 to $30 billion each year in additional expenditures by the federal government. It would have called for export controls on agricultural products. In my judgment, the best way to get jobs is to expand the private sector, where 5 out of 6 jobs today exist in our economy. We can do that by reducing federal taxes, as I proposed about a year ago when I called for a tax reduction of $28 billion. 3/4 of it to go to private taxpayers and 1/4 to the business sector. We could add to jobs in the major metropolitan areas by a proposal that I recommended that would give tax incentives to business to move into the inner city and to expand or to build new plants so that they would take a plant or expand a plant where people are, and people are currently unemployed. We could also help our youth with some of the proposals that would give to young people an opportunity to work and learn at the same time, just like we give money to young people who are going to college. Those are the kind of specifics that I think we have to discuss on these debates. And these are the kind of programs that I'll talk about on my time.
Mr. Gannon, your question to President Ford.
Mr. President, I would like to continue for a moment on this question of taxes, which you have just raised. You have said that you favor more tax cuts for middle-income Americans, even those earning up to $30,000 a year. That presumably would cost the Treasury quite a bit of money in lost revenue. In view of the very large budget deficits that you have accumulated and that are still in prospect, how is it possible to promise further tax cuts and to reach your goal of balancing the budget?
At the time, Mr. Gannon, that I made the recommendation for a $28 billion tax cut, 3/4 of it to go to individual taxpayers and 25% to American business, I said at the same time that we had to hold the lid on federal spending, that for every dollar of a tax reduction, we had to have an equal reduction in federal expenditures, a one-for-one proposition. And I recommended that to the Congress with a budget ceiling of $395 billion, and that would have permitted us to have a $28 billion tax reduction. In my tax reduction program for middle-income taxpayers, I recommended that the Congress increase personal exemptions from $750 per person to $1,000 per person. That would mean, of course, that for a family of 4, that family would have $1,000 more personal exemption, money that they could spend for their own purposes, money that the government wouldn't have to spend. But if we keep the lid on federal spending, which I think we can with the help of the Congress, we can justify fully a $28 billion tax reduction. In the budget that I submitted to the Congress in January of this year, I recommended a 50% cutback in the rate of growth of federal spending. For the last 10 years, the budget of the United States has grown from about 11% per year. We can't afford that kind of growth in federal spending. And in the budget that I recommended, we cut it in half.
It is 3 a.m.
A growth rate of 5 to 5.5%. With that kind of limitation on federal spending, we can fully justify the tax reductions that I have proposed. And it seems to me with the stimulant of more money in the hands of the taxpayer and with more money in the hands of business to expand, to modernize, to provide more jobs, our economy will be stimulated so that we'll get more revenue and we'll have a more prosperous economy.
Mr. President, to follow up a moment, the Congress has passed a tax bill, which is before you now, which did not meet exactly the sort of outline that you requested. What is your intention on that bill, since it doesn't meet your requirements? Do you plan to sign that bill?
That tax bill does not entirely meet the criteria that I established. I think the Congress should have added another $10 billion reduction in personal income taxes, including the increase of personal exemptions from $750 to $1,000. And Congress could have done that if the budget committees of the Congress and the Congress as a whole had not increased the spending that I recommended in the budget. I'm sure you know that in the resolutions passed by the Congress, they have added about $17 billion in more spending.
It was like 45 years ago. They still sound like whiny little bitches, huh? That was the point. Yeah, that was the point. So yeah, that is over 2 hours for me in the night after bartend day. And I do this every night, sometime after midnight when I get home from the bar. Rant, politics, get stoned. Thanks for joining me, guys. Join me again sometime. I'll be ranting politics and getting high. Talk about the day's protests, the day's strikes, and fucking anti both parties. Thanks, guys. Good night.